always like my other comrades would be like, yeah, I was wearing this thing and I was in a coffee shop and some Zionist woman came up and she was like
you're
yelling at
you're
me.
looking for fights.
Yeah, and I'm like, come on, say it. I'm ready. I got the arsenal. I'm ready.
That's funny. That's funny. I feel like I'm picking fights sometimes too. I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of a good energy, Sometimes, when you're like a communist or something, and you're just looking for like an opponent. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm like, I spent all day online having arguments about this. I'm ready for someone in the real world to do it.
Yeah, yeah. How you been though? Generally,
I mean, been good, like considering the world, whatever. Things
for
are good.
sure.
I've been lucky. A few months ago, one of the t-shirt designs kind of like went off, and
Which one was
so
that?
it was the CIAT.
The CIAT? Oh, that one was hard. That one's hard.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones I ever made actually. I've been selling that one for like a year and a half or two.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
What about you, man? How things been for you?
Not bad. Not bad. I've been trying to like wake up before like 2 p.m. or something like that. Like my sleep schedule is awful right now. I've been trying to fix
When
my
are you going
sleep
to bed?
schedule. Huh?
What time are you going to bed?
Like 4.
Okay, okay, that's a
Yeah.
little bit more reasonable.
Yeah. I work for a school, so like I've been off all summer. So and then they're beginning next
Oh,
week.
okay.
So yeah. Yeah, I'm like trying to
Are you a
fix
are you a
everything.
teacher?
I'm a teacher's aide.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know you're. I'm not going to say your number, but I know where you're from based on your area code. Where, like city-wise, generally would are you? Because I was trying to figure it out. I used to live in Patterson, so.
Oh, okay. I'm in the southwest, near. I'm in like the agricultural area, but like there's like suburbs there, if you know what I
Got it.
mean.
Would you say you're within like 45 minutes of Modesto?
Easily, easily.
Okay. Okay. Chill. Cool. We don't want we don't want all of our enemies to know.
Yeah, yeah. Do you get weird looks with that BB shirt though? Like any of your shirts? Have you noticed any weird looks ever?
Um, well, the BB one more than anything. It's
Right.
actually well, because like I call them the choose your fighter tee because it was like basically sort of like a 90s style bootleg, but one is the Kassan Brigades and the other one's the PFLP. Um, and like those are kind of like, a little bit more controversial or like bombastic or something.
Right.
But I think you have to like look a little bit more to like get a sense of what is going on.
Right. Right.
Um, and the BB one's just like so like fucking hit you right in your face that it's the one that's begging for it.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's like
but
immediate. Like you gotta know a little bit about Palestine, things like that for like the other shirts. I feel like, but
yeah, exactly.
Netanyahu, everybody knows who Netanyahu is.
Yeah, I'm just lucky though, because like the neighborhood that I'm in Brooklyn, and just like Brooklyn in general, like the general sense of the politics here is much more radical, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like assumed that you're like very heavily pro-Palestine. It's like there's all these like I guess like attributes of the people that live here, whether or not they're like legit about it, you know. But most of the time when I see it, it'll be like, like a couple or something. And then as I'm passing, I'll see like one of the people to be, you know, uh, yeah,
Yeah.
not getting the angry Zionist supporter like coming at me.
Right. Right. I feel like Southern California politics here are very like performative a little bit. Like there are genuine like activists and things like that, but like people will be like, yeah, yeah, free Palestine, and then they'll go to like Starbucks or something. Like
Yeah.
that's how Southern California generally is. And I'm in redneck territory, so you can't even be like openly like too openly Palestine, or like you're gonna get punched out by like a boomer dad or something. Like
Oh yeah, they'll go straight fists.
so straight fists. Yeah.
Yeah, my girlfriend's originally from Oakland. Um, and I was born like when I was born, that's where my mom was. But I spent I guess like my earlier years in like the East Bay.
Yeah.
Um, but like all those areas are pretty progressive too.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I'll say progressive, not like leftist necessarily, but like Oakland obviously is like pretty commie as far as cities go.
Mm.
Yeah, I've been fairly lucky, like while I've been political, to be in places that I'm generally like with my people.
Oh yeah.
Um, because like before I left to New York, I wasn't like a right winger or I would call myself like a liberal or something. But like I was like I'm gonna be a fashion mogul.
Right.
Um, like I came here to go to the school that Tom Ford went to. Um, before my literal first winter break, my one of my best friends when I was back home for Christmas, he was like, "You got to watch this documentary." And then and then I watched the doc, and I was like, "If this is real, I gotta like change my whole life." And so I dropped a bunch of my fashion stuff to like do a couple poli sci and a couple econ theory classes. And I came back and I was like, it's worse than I thought.
Oh yeah.
um,
Oh yeah. Wait, was that in the East Coast? Was that New York or?
yeah, I came to Parsons School of Design.
Oh, okay. Okay. I feel like
But I
New
just got
York
really
is
lucky
like,
when I switched to radical politics, like the new school, which is the parent school of Parsons,
yeah.
has one of the most radical politics and econ departments in the country.
Oh my gosh. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Holy
Oh,
shit.
I was super fucking lucky. I mean, I'm in crazy debt now, but
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I've organized a little bit in the Bay, and like people are very like they're very open to like communism, socialism in the Bay. You know, you'll be like driving down a highway. There's like a hammer and sickle somewhere on a bridge. Like
yeah.
they're accepting there, but they're still just like there's still just an era of liberal performance in California. I feel like I don't know. It's just something about California where like Californians will be like, yeah, yeah, I believe in it, but like, it's yeah, it's performative.
Well, I don't feel like there's as much action. I also feel like because I was in San Diego. That's where I did like high school and shit.
Yeah,
Um, and all those people like think they're like good and like liberal or okay. They're like sort of quintessential socially liberal, fiscally conservative, which is just conservative. They're like you could be gay, but poor people should die. Um, uh, but yeah, like they think they're progressive because they're like, I like trees,
exactly, exactly.
and that's not really much of anything.
There's a little bit of like white chauvinism within like a lot of these movements, just like the feminist movements within California, everything. There's a little bit of and then where I am, which is like deep redneck territory, like rednecks are such odd people because like they will have like the worst politics like imaginable, and then they're either like the sweetest person you've ever met or like the meanest person you've ever met. Like there's no in between. There's no in between. He could be like a dude in like a Confederate flag, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like he's like the sweetest guy ever, just like
Yeah, yeah.
shaking hands with black people, people of color, like with the Confederate flag. Like or it's like the meanest person you've ever met, like what you expect from a redneck. Like
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the other thing, just like with conservatives in general, is like their politics are so close. Like the root causes of their,
mm,
like issues, they're on it. They're like, like fuck big pharma, fuck big blah 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 blah. And then, it's just like at that last step, and then they take a hard turn to where they shouldn't go. Um,
exactly, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Like you could have a conversation with them for like an hour and agree on everything, and then you mention socialism or communism, and they're like, "You fucking sick fuck."
Yeah, yeah, and they love. I mean, I a lot of times I feel like their criticisms of like the Democrats or the liberals are like sometimes they're so spot on. Sometimes they're like kind of goofy. Like it's like oh, they're gay or something like that or woke. But sometimes it's like yeah, Democrats are fake activism. Like they are pulling the wool over your eyes. But
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
solution is to like go harder right. Like I almost feel like Democrats are part of that system purposefully to like represent the left. So like
Yeah.
if they block you from moving further left is basically what I'm saying. They cause a lot of
Yeah,
people
it's
to
like
move
the
further right.
classic, the ratchet effect.
The ratchet effect, yeah.
The
Yeah.
ratchet effect, yeah. Totally, totally. I mean, yeah, without going like I hate the whole like without going like tinfoil or whatever. Um, I guess I'm just very curious about like how aware the specific actors in like say the Democratic Party or whatever are
Hmm.
how aware they are of like their strategy and like what they're doing actively, and
Yeah.
how much of it is just sort of like institutionalization and sort of like that liberal pragmatism, which just is shitty, but like they are well-meaning, and they're like, well, pragmatically we can't do any of these things, and how much of it is like a really concerted effort to sterilize leftist movements, to
Yeah.
get us to capitulate, out of like harm reduction or whatever, like um that space between like sort of like intelligent design and sort of like the spontaneity of just like um liberal uh like I hate saying praxis, but like like liberal action. I don't know where it is in that really.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. No, no, I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. Because like there is some intellectualism to it. Like there is some planning to it, but also it's just the system itself. The system itself just creates this as much as it is. And I've talked to like so many people who are like yeah, I love free healthcare, yada yada. Like I want to see investments within communities, yada yada. But the Democrats aren't going to do that. That's why I'm a Republican, right? Like I want to fight against the like Trump's going to drain the swamp or something like that. Like fight
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
Trump's rhetoric is so smart because he actually does kind of get what the issues within America are. It's like corruption, it's neoliberalism, it's this like entrenched party elite, things like that. But his solutions are always like deport Mexicans, yada yada. And then he
Yeah.
he he positions himself as like anti-establishment, but he's so within the establishment, like to a T. He's like part of the very class that the establishment gets its power from, which is the bourgeois. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's this funny act. I don't know.
No, it's very brilliant, but like not like I'm like a Bernie guy by any stretch, but that was what was really potent about 2016 and
Yeah.
2020 with Bernie's candidacy, is that they both were populist speakers, orators, candidates, and they were both speaking to the same issue,
Mm.
and um like that, and that was the thing with the liberals, like they really don't want to speak to the issue because the issue is systemic,
Mm.
and it's like easy for Trump because he doesn't actually believe anything he's saying. I don't even know how much he knows what the fuck he's saying. He's just kind of going up. One of his like aides from his presidency came out and he's like, yeah, Trump's an actual moron. He suggested we build a moat with alligators at the border.
Yeah.
So it's like I know that he's actually just a dumbass. Um, but he at least is speaking to like a rage, a sort of collective discontent, um, that the Democratic establishment refuses to
Yeah.
because of their beholdens to capital interests.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think just liberals, like neoliberals, don't want to admit that there are any problems because the problem is them, right? And then at the very least, like Trump, as much as he represents the establishment, he's also sort of representing like a new shift away from like the common way that neoliberal economics and policies have been done.
Yeah,
And so he's at least like willing to admit that some shit is wrong with our country. And just Democrats don't want to do that. They don't want to. There's nothing wrong with our country. There's nothing wrong with this genocide. You're like they're trying to gaslight us into thinking that everything is normal. Like this is normalcy. But I feel like the only normal people are the ones in like a fetal position right now, like screaming and crying and shitting themselves, like vomiting. Like if you see like the horrible things that have been done in Palestine, Sudan, and like if anybody, well, also people who are organizing, obviously, and fighting against the system. But also, I think the normal response for everybody should be screaming and shitting themselves and crying. Like this, we should not normalize what is going on. But Democrats just want everything to be normalized. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, in a general sense, just like personally, like I feel fucked up all the time.
Yeah,
Like just like going about my normal life feels fucked up. You know,
absolutely.
like I get low key happy when I'll see like a think piece or something from some other left aligned person. It's like being good to yourself is actually like good, like a good part of your personal praxis, because like like being able to like maintain yourself and keep going is essential to keeping going.
Yeah.
Um, but it doesn't stop me. Like we had a weekend getaway, a few weeks ago, and I was having a nice time. It was nice to get out of the city. It was nice to like not be on my phone. It was the time that Biden dropped out, so we ended up like kind of getting back into it a little bit. But um, the whole time, like while I'd be like enjoying a little bit of peace, I'd be like, who the fuck am I to be able to enjoy any of this shit?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, just like having a lot of fucking like guilt and shame about any of that.
I know, I know. It's whenever I'm eating something, whenever I'm enjoying a meal, whenever I'm having like a moment of happiness, or just in the back of my mind, it's like there are people who are currently going through famine, through genocide, through like
Yeah,
a second Holocaust. Like there's a little bit of guilt. There's a little bit
yeah,
of guilt associated with that, and like it, of course, it's important to recognize that this is being done all by the bourgeois. Like Michael Parenti had this like really great speech where he was like, whenever politicians say we're at war, we're doing this, it's stupid because it's them doing it, right? Like it's the bourgeois
yeah,
doing it. The proletariat ain't doing nothing. But still, I
yeah,
think there is like this collective shame and that I feel, and I think everybody feels. They're just suppressing it in their own intellectual layers, like their own
yeah.
cognitive layers. Either it's doubling down on the genocide, either it's saying, well, I only care about my community, yada yada. It's things like that.
Yeah. I mean, the my community, the sort of like liberal pushback since
Yeah.
Kamala came to, that's I think that's actually been maybe the most difficult part of the whole thing recently. Um, is like really worrying that all of that collective rage and discontent and like the sort of the contradictions that were exposed the moment that all this happened,
Yeah.
that now they've the center I don't even want to call it center left, but you know the center now, these liberals, like that one guy, he's like, here's my leftist card, and he like did this one. Did you see that?
I saw that TikTok. Yeah.
Dude, I was livid. But that, I'm like, you guys now, I don't know if that's like your own way of trying to be okay with it. You're like, if this is here, maybe it's taking away your own power. You're like, I could never actually affect that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pretend that doing this one political action is helping me or helping people like me in my own country, without really understanding the fact that like the idea of like national protectionism while your country is like simultaneously facilitating a genocide is Nazi shit. Like that's a Nazi right there.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
if
I
you, it's
Kamala
like
should not
really,
get votes. She should be in The Hague. Like that's
yeah,
that's how I feel. But
yeah.
it's they're trying to justify it somehow, work around it. Oh, I'm sorry for cutting you off if you want to continue.
Oh, dude.
Okay.
No, you're totally right. You actually just saying at the Hague, it reminded me. There's a great Instagram account. They do like a lot of like AI imagery. And they had one this morning. It's called Labor Wave Aesthetics. Is
Yeah.
the gram if you don't follow them. And they had one where they had generated Trump and Kamala like on their knees in like orange prison uniforms in a courtroom.
Hell
And
yeah.
I was like, I'm stealing this. I'm gonna
Hell
do
yeah.
something with this.
Hell yeah. Yeah, because the thing is, this genocide has pretty much revealed like every single contradiction within like the Western world, right? Like ever
Yeah,
since the 60s and like post World War II decolonization, like the Western world has acted like it's not imperialist, it's not racist, it's not this like giant imperialistic racist, empire built on genocide, slavery, colonialism. But I think this genocide has taken off every single mask about it, right? Like that we're a democracy and we're not a dictatorship of the bourgeois, that we're not
yeah.
imperialist, that we're not founded on the most extreme virulent racism, because it was sort of able to institutionalize it, right? It was sort of able to like systemize it where it was less direct, right? Like
Yeah.
neocolonialism is so much harder to address than direct colonialism, right? Like British within India is so much easier to understand than British companies taking, extracting from India, or like French
Yeah.
companies extracting from Africa, but Africans get to keep their own flag. Like, but and so it's like racism, right? Like somebody calling of somebody else the N word, or like segregation is so much easier to understand than a systemic racism with like different policing of black communities.
Well, it's like
Or
it's just like the idea that direct violence and indirect violence
yeah,
are the outcomes are the same, but you have a feeling. It's the reality is so clear when you see a cop or like an imperial military guard or something like beat someone
yeah,
versus seeing money and resources systematically extracted from someplace, and now people are poor and starving and dying or whatever. Um, there's a lot of layers in between specific actions of either like an individual actor, a company, or a state, and that end outcome of um, the poor dying.
Yeah,
That and there's a lot of like ways to ideologically uh, explain that,
absolutely.
and instead of being like, well, in a hierarchy in a military, we told this guy to kill that guy.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. There's this book called The New Jim Crow, and the author, she's not like Marxist by any means, but in it, she like talked about like how Jim Crow is still alive because of the drug war and the unequal policing of black communities and like Hispanic
yeah,
communities. But it is so much stronger now than it has ever been because there's such an ideological leeway within it.
yeah,
Like you can just say, since everything on paper is now equal, like black, white, everything, you can just say that these people are just using drugs. When like of course you're policing them heavier. And so I think this genocide has revealed that like the Western world is now a democracy that's racist, yada yada, and liberals don't want to contend with that. And so
yeah,
like to be against the Palestinian genocide is to be against everything that the Western world stands for. Is to be against imperialism, capitalism itself, and to be against liberalism itself, right? To be against the ideology of the Democrats, the Republicans, and that's such a hard thing for liberals to do. To be against this system that they sort of come up with these like pseudo intellectual, coping
rationalization.
mechanisms,
Yeah,
dissonance, whatever you want to
yeah.
call it.
Well, I mean, I honestly, I just think about it like that's a rationalization. There's
Mm-hmm.
a, not to be like intellectual dickhead or whatever, but there's just a concept that Foucault talks about that I really liked, which is called veridiction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea that within a system, this is true. Um, and and that's the thing is that within the liberal worldview, as long as you don't break out of it,
Yeah,
a lot of the things that they say are true because they create the rules by which this truth is measured.
absolutely,
They create the structures by which we determine success or not. And I mean
absolutely,
success like as personal monetary success as much as it is the success of a system or a program or something like that. And so they're able to, because they've created the ruler, say, oh, we've actually been really successful, or we've done really good, or these bad outcomes are also because, like, not because of the system, because we heard of this yardstick. It's this other thing: individual inaction. An individual, like not having the merit. You didn't do the work.
absolutely.
You shouldn't have done that crime. You shouldn't, whatever. So there's a. I know we're gonna get into it, so I'm like saving a lot of the stuff.
Yeah,
I've been writing a script on new fascism.
new fascism.
Um,
That sounds interesting.
well, it's like so. I mean, obviously, Parenti's always like the blueprint. So I was going back through Black Shirts and
All
Reds,
right.
and there's just like this quote. He's quoting what does he say? He says, divested of its ideological and organizational paraphernalia, fascism is nothing more than a final solution to the class struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The total submergence and exploitation of democratic forces for the benefit and profit of higher financial circles. And like when you look at it like that, you're like, to fascism, there's a class struggle component, and there's a cultural struggle component.
Yeah.
Um, and what I was thinking about with the new fascism is like effectively with Reagan, the class struggle component of fascism was one. Like when we had that neoliberal term, which started with Jimmy Carter, but when it really kind of won with Reagan,
Yeah.
like that component of fascism, which is the important component, and all the rest is just the ways that fascism was propped up and justified and legitimized to these cultures. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the misogyny, the sexism, or not sexism, the like the gendered and sexuality components, the racist components. Those were all justifying sort of ideological like elements to make it work. To make the people that were doing the terrible things, be a part of it. And so now that we've all accepted, that's why I almost think like neoliberalism is just like fascism devoid of the cultural element. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been looking through that, and as soon as I saw that quote, I was like, "Oh, you fucking brilliant man! You fucking brilliant man!" You know?
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I think you're absolutely right because neoliberalism, well, it is so similar to fascist economics. I mean, fascists were the first to do privatization. Basically,
Mhm.
like they were like some of the earliest adopters of the neoliberal practices. Neoliberalism even came from Pinochet, who like you can very easily argue was a fascist. Um,
Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
and so it's the only struggle left now is the cultural struggle. And then what is the cultural struggle? Democrat versus Republican.
yeah,
Damage control. If you don't vote for Kamala, you're an awful human being, and yada yada. You're homophobic and you're giving up on
yeah,
black people. Like just ridiculous ideas like that. And I think when you're stuck within the liberal Republican dichotomy and the internal logic of capitalism, it makes sense. It makes
yeah,
sense, but Palestine, COVID, all of these things have just taken such a wrecking ball to this worldview and its foundation that I feel like they're sort of scraping. They're desperate now, right? Just to like hold on to and maintain this phantasm that they've built up. This like false phantasm that has kept them from the real logical conclusion that this is all class struggle, that this is just an inevitable result of monopoly finance capital, and that the Democrats are just as much of our enemies as Republicans. But I think that's just
yeah.
hard. Also, I forgot to introduce you. Hello, guys. Today I'm talking to Comrade Workwear. I think like 10, 20 minutes into this. They run an apparel store with hella cool shirts. You want to introduce yourself, what you guys do?
Yeah. So you guys is just me. It's just one guy. So if anyone is waiting on an order, it's because it's just me, and it takes me a long time. But yeah, I have I call it a socialist apparel line, which I guess it is by a certain metric because it is just one guy and his labor, and he appropriates that surplus. I have like uh, another component to it we're building out right now called Comrade Library, which is a global sort of like resource list of organizations to tap into wherever you are, and other like learning resources like writings and thinkers and podcasts, which Pokepreet will be featured in.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
And buy a Comrade Workwear shirt. Like the apparel goes hard. The hats go hard. The stickers go hard. Like everything goes hard.
I'll have to send you. I'll have to send you some stuff. Yeah, honestly, just because I don't have space in my little teeny tiny apartment anymore. It's like an Amazon fulfillment center in here. Honestly, my girlfriend's being super chill about it. I'm like, this place is packed with boxes.
Drowning in the sauce,
Straight up,
the
man.
success, the success, you know.
Hopefully, I'll tell you when I get out of student debt if it's successful.
I got you. Well, how did
Yeah.
you start this, by the way?
Um. Well, I mean, I'd initially come to New York for fashion.
Yeah.
As soon as I kind of got into radical politics, I dropped all that. Kind of shifted my design into um, like urban design and agricultural design. I was working on aquaponics for a while. And then, just you kind of like sink back into like work stuff just to like make life happen. And so I was just doing like a marketing design job for a while. And there's a bar across the street I really fuck with, and they have really sick merch. And about 2 years ago, I got kind of inspired randomly, and I made them a design. And I sent it to the dude, and I was like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Oh, thanks, it's cool." And I was like, "Yeah, if you want me to like make any edits, no big deal. You can use it, you can have it." And he's like, "No, I'm good." I was
Right.
like, "Oh, cool, oh, cool, cool. Yeah, yeah, no big deal. I do want to make one for myself that's chill." And he goes, "Don't do that." And then yeah, and then my girlfriend was like, kind of like saw me kind of light up doing this work, and was like, "I think you should do this." And I was like, "A commie clothing line? That's kind of cringe." Um, but I was like, "Fuck it, I need to do something again."
Absolutely.
And so I made a couple designs. My broader immediate network responded really well. It took me like 5 or 6 months to get into like really like a social presence. But after, I think it started with like a video um on like why landlords are parasites or something.
Right.
And after that, like it became a real clothing line where it had like an okay following.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think what you're doing is important because like fashion itself is it's so enmeshed within like the liberal ideology. Like the best you ever get is like sort of like fake radicalism, like fake faux pas against the systemism, but like it's never really
Yeah.
like that great of like a statement against society. You know, it's it's a
Oh
mesh
yeah, I
thing
mean,
they
I
did.
think that yeah, well, I think that that was sort of like a big part of it for me, and like why I was excited was just I I do like to kind of like be a little bombastic. I do like to be a
Mm-hmm.
little controversial. I love having these conversations. I'd also love if I like saw someone in the world and I was like, oh my God, there's a commie, or like there's a socialist. Like, every now and again you see like a dude like wearing a Marx shirt with like, the cool guy glasses or something, and I'd
Yeah,
be like, sick, we're out here. Um, and I think I loved, and this is the thing about fashion, because it's sort of like it's like a double-edged sword. I don't know who said it, but there's a quote. It's like fashion is capitalism's favorite child.
mm-hmm.
And that's very true, and that's one of the reasons why like I do always have like a slight icky feeling towards it. But there's this other space about it, which is be able to like put an idea, like a meme or a thought, into the real world where people are like forced to see it, which is kind of cool. It's really cool to be able to see another one of you out in the wild and be like, I'm not alone.
Yeah,
Maybe even start a friendship. Maybe that could start something. Um, and then like the third one, which is like my favorite, is whether or not they agree or disagree or whatever, but starting a conversation because you've kind of like had this loud statement.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, and um, I think that like in the world of propaganda, which is like a big part of any leftist like organizing or leftist work, um, you know, having a little sign with you all the time, it's like this is the thing that I want to talk about. Um, and if you're down to talk about it, I'm right here. It's kind of like a cool thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also I think just like fashion, music, things like that are like such big parts of like communist, Marxist, just even like leftist traditions that we've lost over time.
Yeah.
Like it used to be like what, red shirts, it used to be Trotsky's leather brigades, like like things like that. And then the music used to be communist music used to be on point. Like within the modern day, as we've also seen like the communist movement decline worldwide because like the 90s, Gorbachev, all of that, we've also just seen the cultural aspects of communism sort of lose steam, and I think like we need to bring that back in some way.
Why do you, I mean, I have an idea of why, but why do you think it lost steam?
Why do I think it lost steam? I think for part of it was really, well, first of all, base superstructure, like the neoliberalism and capitalism had its big win in the 90s as like the worldwide communist movement fell to like revisionism and the dissolution of the USSR. But also, I think part of it is also just liberalism has been really good at co-opting a lot of the radicalism, right? Rage Against the Machine, whatever, yada yada. But like, it'll just be, well, Rage Against the Machine is a pretty cool band, but like it'll just be like Rage Against the Machine, but owned by multi-billion-dollar corporation, like things like
Yeah,
that.
owned by RCA or whatever the
Yeah,
fuck.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think another reason why it kind of fell out is actually like a general problem of the left.
mm,
I know like people talk about like leftist perfectionism, but I think that leftists these days are constantly kind of like engaging in some sort of like self-criticism,
yeah,
um, and trying to be good. And there's so many things that are fucked that you're like you're kind of spread thin on your like being a good comrade, I guess. Um, and I think that uh like twofold. One, the idea like sort of with the new left and after the fall, there was a sense of like actually supporting communism, socialism. In the sort of like third way politics, you're like it's something else. I think there was like a shift of leftist energy towards like the third way, which
yeah,
was all trash anyway. Um, but then I think there's this like other space which is like just being critical of the performativity of it all.
mm,
Um, and it's like, oh, you're wearing your little Shea shirt. Well, what are you actually doing?
right, right,
You know what I
absolutely,
mean? It's like sort of like lowest common denominator way to like show that you're a leftist or that you care, but without necessarily having to do anything. Um, and I guess like I feel like that's kind of like a big part. They're like, it's not like a lifestyle brand I wear. It's this other thing.
yeah, yeah. And is this like there's this sense that like if you're wearing you have to like culturally be Marxist too, and that means not participating within commodities at all, right? Like
Yeah,
for
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
reason, like there's this like Christian-ish like purity tendency within like especially
yeah, yeah. A
American.
Puritanism, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I can't talk about like European or whatever, but like especially like American leftism, like there's just such as Christian puritanism where it's like you can't even like buy commodities, right? Like you can't even be
yeah,
associated with commodities, and so like to associate communism with like a shirt or with music, and of course this is like a bad reading of communism. Like no communist has ever said like don't buy a shirt, right? Like obviously
yeah,
we have issues with the relations with how they're made and commodity
yeah,
production itself, but like obviously buy a shirt. Like that's not what communism is against. But I think because of there's this such a strange puritanical reading of Marxism within the West that it's almost like a sin to like produce music for communism or to like wear a shirt for communism, especially like Rage Against the Machine. They get paid for their leftist music, and then everybody's constantly criticizing them. Like, how dare you get fucking paid? How dare you play concerts? Yada yada yada, like things like that.
yeah. I mean, and I like the thing that's most annoying about it though is it betrays a lack of knowledge about the thing that you are both criticizing and like desiring or work, even if you're not
Absolutely.
working towards hoping, you know, like I guess there are people that say like they maybe would rail against like commodity production, but I would say that's like a communist. And if you're an actual communist, you know that socialism becomes before it, so you're actually a socialist too.
Yeah,
Like there's no button to jump from here to there. It's like
absolutely.
commodities exist fully. Commodity production exists under socialism. I don't care, like unless you're an idiot, like unless you're like literally living in the clouds, like commodity
Utopianistic.
production exists. Yeah,
Utopianistic. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, full idealism.
Full on idealism. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. But also there's nothing wrong with buying a commodity. The issue that Marxism has with commodity production is just how it's produced, like the extraction.
Yeah,
Surplus is the commodity itself doesn't hold any moral value. But I think that's a
yeah.
very hard thing for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. Speaking of that,
Well,
though,
okay.
are you a sellout? Like a lot of people have accused of like being like that itself, like Rage Against the Machine. How dare you make money? How dare you for? Are you a capitalistic sellout just using socialism to like make money as an aesthetic?
Um, well, I just started making any money with this, so I haven't sold out yet. Uh, no, I mean, I think like for me, it's like we're all selling our labor and doing work all the time.
Absolutely.
Um, like we're all contributing in some way into the broader capitalist machine, and no individual is going to be the one that like gets us out of it.
Absolutely.
Um, I would be very happy if my work in this was able to support me financially. Like I'd be happy if like my labor if like I was able to produce enough and give provide enough value to my people, that this was like the way that I made all my money. And even if that's the point that I get to, it's not sellout shit. There's like two components to this that I think about, and it's like one, um, supply chain shit, and then there's sort of like the enterprise and it's like organization and its structure. Um, and as an individual producer, you own there's limits to how much you can control a supply chain,
Yeah.
while still like actually being able to produce a good that someone can afford. So like when it comes to that, I try and make sure that like I use as ethically produced blanks as I possibly can, and I go between a couple. There's like union made blanks in the US, and
Mm.
that doesn't mean there's no exploitation there, but at least that there's like some worker power involved. The other ones I use are at least like sustainably produced and like at least in the information that's put across, whether or not they're very transparent, because a lot of these big t-shirt producers, they can say a lot of things on their website. Who knows?
Absolutely.
And you can try and do your research to make sure things are good. But I'm like, is it sustainable? Are they at least doing fair wage practices? Are they doing things like that? So I'm like,
Mm.
handle that part of my supply chain. The other ones, all my like my printer that I use, my embroidery, they're one man armies that own their own little shops.
Mm.
So it's like they're kind of just like another version of me. They control the their own system of production.
You can
How
almost say like
much
they're
they want to,
artisans.
Yeah, they're artisans
Yeah,
effectively. Like one has his print shop in Virginia. The other one has his embroidery like studio. It's in Greenpoint. You know, so like they do their stuff. And then outside of that, it's like I'm not exploiting anyone because no one else is doing the work but me. So,
absolutely,
um, you know, I am just an individual producer making a commodity within a broader capitalist system. I don't profit. That's the thing. No matter what, I don't profit because profit is a reflection of labor input being undercompensated for the labor, you know, the value that it produces. If there's only a single laborer, there's only the value I produce. So like
absolutely,
this, the any, you know, there, you could say there's no surplus. You could say there's, you know, that's just whatever the value add that my own labor has brought into it. Um, you know, like if we were actually going to look at it through an analytical, like Marxist economic lens.
absolutely, absolutely.
Um, but you know, like if I ever am blessed enough that I can have another person working here with me, which I'm gonna need at some point because I can't keep doing it all myself. Like I want them to be a worker owner, you know, and so we will together determine the conditions of production, the conditions of surplus production, and where the surplus goes. And
Right.
so long as you're like holding to your values as best you can, you know, I guess you're not a sellout. It's like, do you believe in what you're talking? I believe in it. I believe in the shit for fucking, you know, 12 years, as long as I have known about it.
Absolutely. I think it's such a way of like individualizing a system. Like we all have to participate in capitalism at some point. But I think conservatives, I think non-socialists, their conception of Marxism is it starts with the individual, right? Like the individual should start communism himself before he moves to a whole system. That's not how it works. You have to take down a whole system. Like one
Yeah.
person can't just magically decide that I'm gonna be the most communistic man ever on earth. And then suddenly it creates like a whole paradigm shift or besides like in order to like avoid interacting with capitalism and all its exploitative things, you have to live in like the jungle with like a stick and a sphere, like just like isolate yourself from society. It's untenable. It's untenable in my
And that's
opinion.
also like the least Marxist sort of like position to take. Marx's entire thing was he's like, we've up until now we've interpreted, we've like looked at it, we've analyzed it, we've understood. Our goal is to change it. So like
Absolutely.
you'd actually not be a good Marxist to be like, I'm gonna go be the most communist person by living in the jungle and like being like and you know like a hunter gatherer or something.
Absolutely.
Um, because you're actively not participating in the process of liberation. And I think like also understanding it all as a process is important. But it's not surprising that liberals want to individualize socialism. It's just once again like such a reflection on how not to be like unnuanced about how dumb they are. It's like how can you listen to me give you a broad systemic critique and then not think that like my solution is broad systemic overhaul.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
here's my systemic critique about how individuals can't do anything under the system unless we collectively change the system. And then you're like, well, why are you not individually being in a different system?
Right, right. And
It's the stupidest thing.
it's also the fact that like there's no morality in Marxism. Like there's no like good or bad within Marxism. Like it's just
Yeah,
it's almost it's scientific. It's scientific. Capitalism itself is seen as a natural progression that's necessary from feudalism. And, you know, it's
yeah,
just that it's outlived its usefulness, you know, as
mhm,
Marxists see it.
yeah.
So I think ascribing morality to like the actions of individuals, especially those that are not like participating in like exploitative practices where they're getting surplus value off of other people, it's just dumb. It's just dumb, basically.
Yeah, like the closest thing that Marx comes to a moralistic critique is just acknowledging that the economic like concept of exploitation exists, and it's not even moral at all. It just be like exploitation exists. You're not getting paid what you put in. That's and he just kind of says it and he shows how it works.
Yeah,
You know, there's actually no morality in there. You just as you know as a hominid are gonna have like that whole like fair unfair situation and then have a feeling about it. There's no morality.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, so moving on to that, like with your idea of like new fascism, let's just go back to that. What do you think the West has become like so open in fascism recently? Like, was it always fascist? Like, is this a new mode of fascism we're entering? Like, what do you see? Like, why have they taken off the masks so easily now?
Well, I mean, like there's the classic left sort of like trope or aphorism that fascism is capitalism in decline.
Yeah.
Um, and like I think the in decline is the maybe like the less understood part. It's just like it's what capitalism has to turn to when all of its contradictions are on display.
Mm.
And I just think that it's a thing that is more in your face right now, where it's rising in all these places because all of its contradictions are becoming so explicit.
Yeah.
Um, and we've lived with the justifications and the explanations for like why they are the way they are from like the sort of like neoliberal and like very ardent capitalist space. And there was logic to it, and there still is logic, but it's based on nothing. And the more that they give us those same arguments, the more that been able to like peel away at the bullshit. And at a certain point, you either have the space to become like reactionary conservative because like all of us as the working class are experiencing these trials and experiencing the issues and seeing the contradictions. Um, and at that point, you either have the I think the reaction or like the decision or whatever the turn, and the turn is either going to be a broad systemic critique as like I guess moving left, or a sort of like reactionary conservative, like appeal to nostalgia, appeal to the time that was better, and being like we need to go back, whether it's
Absolutely.
based in actual historical fact or not. There's just the reactionary, conservative reactionary take, and I think um, that we're just seeing they're also always the loudest. The fascists are always the loudest. They're always doing their fucking
Mm.
little marches and shit. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I sort of draw a parallel to Plato's cave analogy, right? Like these people who are born in a cave, all they've ever seen is shadows on a wall, and to them, that's their whole world. There's this whole world outside, but all they've ever seen is the shadows in the wall. And I think that's what is currently happening within the West, where COVID, the Palestine issue, like revealed every single contradiction within Western capitalism and neoliberalism. Like neoliberalism promised us such an amazing world, right? Trickle down economics was going to make us all rich. All wars were going to be gotten rid of. Privatization was going to make all these government institutions run so much better for us, right? And deunionization was going to give people more personal choices. And essentially, what it created was this mass inequality, right? All the burdens of capitalism were suddenly pushed from, um, they were suddenly pushed from just being on the periphery, like people who are within the global south and exploited, to people also within the imperial core, right? So Keynesian economics, when the falling rate of profit wasn't that bad, the imperial core workers, they didn't get that bad of a deal, right? You got like a
yeah,
nice welfare state, you got the affordable house, the car, the two kids. But neoliberalism forced, because the falling rate of profit hit the fan in like the 70s, neoliberalism had to come in. It forced more of the burden onto the imperial core working class. And now the imperial core working class, unable to envision like a better world beyond these shadows that they've seen, is turning towards fascism. Pretty much. Like they cannot imagine a better world than this. And as more of the burden comes onto them because of the contradictions of neoliberalism, especially with COVID, with how because the system is set up on mass inequality, the rich just
yeah,
ran away with all the money. Like $50 trillion from the working class to a couple individuals. That's insane. Like the inequality is getting to a breaking point. And these people who have only seen shadows are looking towards one thing, and that's fascism, because that's the only thing that
yeah.
makes sense within their worldview.
Yeah, I think that there's one last component which is I think centered on the
Mm,
bourgeoisie, which is that they're also the general owners of the media apparatuses,
yeah.
and they are going to benefit whether we're full blown like fascist, even culturally, or not.
Mm,
Um, and so the way that capitalism is very like sort of like short term growth, short term profit, short term solution is um holding a leftist view, like the extreme, the radical left or whatever, holding it at a similar level to the the fascist right or the extreme right, whatever, um, is beneficial to them right now. And because at the end of the day, we are more scary to them than the fascist right, because
Easily.
they still know who's in power at
Hmm.
that time. They still know who's going to get the government contracts. They still know that the war profiteering machine's still going to keep going. Like, so I think there's this space of emboldening and highlighting those voices. Um, because it just helps maintain the system in its existing moment,
Yeah,
because once again it feeds into just like the culture war and that lesser evilism. It's like now we always have this enemy that we have to battle against, and it's good for them to be loud, because the louder they are, the more that you have to vote for Kamala. You know what I mean? um and so I think that whether or not we're actually going to be turning to that fascist space in like a real traditional way with like the cultural elements alongside of it, um, I can't speak to. But what I can speak to is that they're going to allow those voices to stay loud, because that maintains the Democratic Party's position of leverage.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a very controlled opposition, pretty much.
yeah,
Every single group within fascism needs an in-group, out-group, and I think what people fail to realize is Democrats have just as much of an out-group as Republicans. Republicans out-group is always like minorities, LGBTQ
yeah,
people, but Democrats out-group is those scary, scary Republicans. It's those scary, scary rednecks. It's this scary, scary Trump. And
yeah,
we have to protect the in group, and it's just such a odd way of it's a shittier class struggle. Basically, like instead of fighting the bourgeois, you fight your neighbor who's pro Trump. You fight, and it distracts you from the actual struggle that is a class struggle, rather than it meshes itself within a cultural struggle. That's what I'll say.
yeah, yeah. No, no, fully, fully, fully. Um, there's a part that I was writing in here, and just for the sake of uh not saying something I don't mean, I'm just gonna read off it. That was like the two-party system is a tool of the ruling class. Their differences are only cultural. The cultural divide is severe enough to foster deep party loyalty alongside strong, willful ignorance to those components of their party which mirror their opposition. By this, I mean that the intensity of the deeply racist, sexist, and homophobic platform and rhetoric of the conservative right is enough to keep the liberal contingent satisfied with a perpetual battle in staving off the incremental slide to the right. But this is where we get to that whole ratchet effect, is that because the Democratic Party is effectively the final solution class struggle specific, it's just a market, a market oriented party. It's like we can acknowledge that there's problems maybe a little bit, but
Mhm.
every single solution is going to be deeply related to the market. Like, how can the market solve this, and maybe in what ways can we allow for the government be just some tool to help the market do those things. We're going to give you a tax credit. We're going to give you a tax credit.
Yeah,
Oh, we're going to do carbon offset credits. We're going to, there's actually, um, there's no, um, there's no notion of like using the tool of the state as a way to impose solution,
yeah.
ever for the Democrats. Um,
And they're so good at defanging movements, like cutting off the balls of movements, right? Like Black Lives Matter was such a radical movement that was against the system of Americanism itself, and it
yeah,
got incorporated into the Democratic Party, and now its balls have been cut off, right? It's no longer for radically institutionally changing the Democrats. It went from defund the police to now Democrats are funding cop cities. It's
yeah,
it's insane. And so, really, it is that at the end of the day, the economic base is going to be the same, but we're just going to allow you to have a different enemy to attack, or a different enemy to be scared of, right? Because I'll say the Democrats are less about attacking; they're more about fear. Like the out group is more of a fear based out group than an out group that you need to attack, while Republicans are more like I need to attack this out group sort of fear.
yeah. And there's like, I think there's another part of this thing, which
Yeah.
is that the opponent, the opposition for both of them is a caricature.
Okay.
You know, um, and this was a problem during, I think that people were at least talking about in the first Bernie run, um, was like actually appealing to that conservative swath of Trump supporters. You know, it was like Bernie actually can appeal to those people.
Yeah.
Um, and so the only thing that either of them can do really, and this is just sort of like the idea of maintaining divisions within the working class, um, is that you have to have the other one be a caricature. You effectively do have to dehumanize that opponent, you know. So the the reactionary conservative, you know, like their thing is like liberals with their countless genders and like the idea that they want to like impose some new like gendered sexual like, you know, like fucking thing on everyone, that everyone's got to be like gay or trans or
Right.
indoctrinate them, you know, and they want to kill babies and they want immigrants to take all the jobs and all that shit. And then like on the Democratic side, it's like they're just they will talk about like the racism and the sexism and the whatever, um, but it's like an inherent trait about these people. They are inherently this way.
Yeah.
Rather than if the actual point of like the Democratic Party was to win and to bring on these people, it would be to acknowledge the material circumstances that are making these conservative people feel this type of way, to actually create a platform that's going to speak to their issues. And so they won't do that. So all they can do is sell you on a caricatured enemy.
Absolutely. And Democrats are so good at getting other oppressed groups to fight each other, right? Like
The
do
Palestinians.
black people want liberation? Well, it's going to have to come at the cost of Palestinians. Do gay people want
Yeah,
liberation? Well, it's going to have to come at the cost of Palestinians. You know, like
yeah,
it's they're so good at not only dividing the working class amongst like these minority groups and like conservative lines, like the redneck versus the enlightened Democrat liberal lines, but also just within each other. Like, let's fight each other and never turn your head towards the people at the top. Like, it's almost like they sit on like a throne. It's almost like a king sitting at a throne and having like all the peasants just fight each other. And
yeah,
he loves goading them into fighting each other and having them scramble each other for scraps from himself. Right, that's what the
yeah,
Democrats and Republicans basically are. They'll throw like a breadcrumb here, breadcrumb there, and as long as they're fighting each other, they never turn towards you. You know,
yeah.
it's crazy.
Fucking tragic, honestly.
It is. It is. But
Yeah,
I think one beautiful thing is that as many shitty liberals as there are, you know, and we are even seeing like a little bit steam lost within the Palestine acceptance within like wider mainstream liberal society as they turn towards Kamala and Brad Summer. So many people are waking up. Like they're a lot more silent than like the liberals saying like, oh, shut up, vote for Kamala, vote for Kamala. But so many people are
yeah,
waking up to like how bullshit this all is. And every single one of these crises that we have, more and more people wake up to how just bullshit American
yeah,
neoliberalism is, capitalism is, imperialism is, you know, so on and so forth.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Oh well, why do you think you've had a couple of videos about cop cities though? Why do you think Democrats are scrambling for cop cities? Why do you think America's scrambling for cop cities now?
Well, I mean, I think that it's just, and you know, it's like the natural response to a a carceral state and a carceral system, you know, that effectively has to like, um, it's got to stop popular protests, it's got to stop this sort of like backlash that the masses are having against the systems, and it's been happening at larger and larger scales with
Yeah.
the Palestine ones, with BLM. You know, we had you know, 10 years ago, what is it, 24, whatever, 15 shit, with Zuccotti Park, and you know, I think that cop cities are just like the only way that they can, you know, respond to the level of public outcry that they're actually that there seems to, you know, be having, and you know, it's increasing,
Yeah.
so they got to
Yeah.
ramp up.
And they're having all of us fight each other, you know, over like, oh, my group needs to be protected, so fuck that group, while they're like secretly, you know, implementing in cop cities and running away. Like they're getting away with it basically under the guise of faux
Well, yeah, the
progressiveness. But
rulers are making cop cities and little personal bunkers, so
absolutely, absolutely, and even a couple of years ago, like when they were obsessed with space travel, right? When the billionaires were obsessed with space travel, I absolutely felt like that was a calling for the future. Like, put on the tinfoil foil conspiracy hat. But when they're doing climate change and they're more than aware of anybody else that they're fucking destroying the planet, and when they're
Yeah.
suddenly becoming obsessed with space travel,
Space travel. Yeah.
like there's something there, you know?
No, it's one of the funniest things when like the space travel thing. It's another part where it exposes a deep contradiction. This is one of the reasons like I really do like a certain subset of sci-fi. Um, is like Ursula Le Guin, Kim Stanley Robinson. It's actually able to allow you to like imagine a different future. But in this imagined future for like Elon or whoever, what they're gonna do in Mars, they're like, oh, we want to like terraform Mars. We want to
Yeah.
put all of the research and everything, like we're gonna make this be. I'm like, with literally 3% of that effort, we could get the entire thing here to be like good. You don't need to terraform a planet when we already have a fully habitable planet. It's super chill, actually. It's like
Absolutely.
super vibey over here. And we just gotta like, I don't know, like take a beat and stop doing what we're doing. They're like, no, that's fucking insane. I'm actually gonna own Mars, and I'm gonna terraform it and have my own like what mega corporation that is Mars. It's gonna be like Elon Mars.
Absolutely. This like it goes back to that Mark Fisher quote. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is capitalism. And I think
Yeah,
because, capitalism does not allow the bourgeois to give us any concessions whatsoever. Like you could if because the second you start giving concessions, your competition gets one up on you. Right? The
yeah,
second you start giving concessions, another bourgeois bastard gets one up on you, and you stop being almost a capitalist, and they
yeah,
win over you, right? This competitive system. But it's if they had a heart, they could make capitalism long term. Like if every bourgeois person one day just decided to, they could make capitalism long term viable in some sort of way where everybody could sort of equally live, have their fair share,
yeah.
and they would still
Peter
make
Freeze.
profits. They would still be
Yeah,
bourgeois. They would still be rich.
yeah.
You know.
No, that was actually it was one of my favorite books because like there's like this idea I think with Marx or like the Marx tradition that like socialism's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But Peter Fraze came out with that book. It's like called like Four Futures, and it's like the four ways that like capitalism could, like what could happen. But yeah, like I remember reading it and being like, oh, super gross because it was like one was just like sustainable green capitalism. It's like we just find a way to like at least ecologically manage ourselves so
Mm.
that this place can like keep going. Like that's super feasible. And then like what you're talking about is like minor economic concessions to just like have minor reductions in inequality or just like general living standards. Like if they had like a Carnegie or Rockefeller level of because these are all coming off the backs of like the old rich where they're rich, but there was like this like de facto agreement with the public that they like had to support public
Mm.
like things.
Yeah.
It's like if they just and like Carnegie and Rockefeller and they had all these like sort of like little philanthropic efforts. But even if and I'm super critical of philanthropy, I don't think that that's like a solution. But
Absolutely.
like if they were just like a little bit philanthropic, they could solve a lot of these things. Like
Absolutely.
just like what 0.3% of Elon's uh net worth would solve global hunger. What is that? Is that the whole bit? It's like three. It's
It's
like $30 billion could
30
solve.
billion. Yeah, I believe it's something
Yeah,
around that. It's insane. Like with the money we could have sent to with the money we sent to Israel, we could have already ended homelessness
absolutely.
within
Yeah,
America. It's
yeah.
it's crazy, but it's because structurally, like the rich, the bourgeois are digging their own graves. They're their own grave diggers because if they even give any concessions that make this system stable, their competition gets one up on them. Like it's just made so that they're constantly digging with their own
Don't you think
graves.
that's literally? But yeah, in there is the implicit notion of like the sorry like the like it's a board game. So like
Yeah.
I'm setting the rules of the board game. It's like if you let the market be completely free, then that's the bit. Is that you as an individual capitalist, you make a concession to be like more moralistic or ethical or whatever.
Mm.
Someone will get a leg up on you. But if you have an entity like a state or something impose rules that have to be held by all actors, that effectively whatever that ethical, moral, good thing, it doesn't ruin a market, doesn't stop a market. It just stops them from being able to profit to the level that they would be able to do. Like that whole idea is like I'm a little bit ethical. I'm still profiting, but I've decided to like cut a profit here so like my workers can get paid more. But now my competitors gonna be like, actually fuck my workers, make more profit, outgrow me, outcompete me. Eventually I die out.
Yeah.
But if like there's a cap on the level of exploitation, effectively, it's like if no one can get above that, that's just like just the idea of state interference, the sort of like Keynesian economic model. I'm not a Keynesian, I fucking but it Keynesianism itself just acknowledges that you can't allow capitalism to exist freely.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Keynesianism, it worked for a little bit. Like it's Keynesianism saved post World War II capitalism, right? Like it was in such a free fall. It was in such a dangerous zone where all the workers were getting radicalized. Great Depression. It destroyed itself. It ate itself through World War II through its redivision of the imperial assets and holdings. But then Keynesianism came along. It preserve the imperial core workers by giving them enough concessions to keep them happy. That's our boomers today, right? Like they were born into that Keynesian concession world, and that's the capitalism that they know. But it just couldn't do that anymore because of the falling rate of profit, things like that. And it's just to the point where it seems like they're digging their own graves, but also it's who's gonna die first, who's gonna go into the grave first, because we're along the ride. Like we're also getting our own graves dug without our permissions, and it's whoever falls in first at this point.
Yeah, I think that I know we have like another couple questions before we wrap up, but just kind of going off that, it's like I think that there is like a leftist sort of like a general feeling for a lot of online left. I don't know if it's for everybody. Of just being like, I gotta want this world to burn. Like you're like, why aren't we just like seeing that we're like at the cliff and that like we have to like blood's gotta be spilled or something, like we gotta burn some shit down to like stop it. And I know that that's not like necessary. I know it's not feasible. I know it's not practical, and I know that like on the other side of that is not people being like necessarily cared for or secure after
Absolutely.
some like violent revolt. So it's not like the thing that like I practically want. I just like I know that we can't keep going like this anymore, and it's so disheartening to see a completely disorganized left that can't actually meet our like oppressor class
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
at their
I
at their
think
level or whatever.
I think partly it's by design, of course. I think
Yeah,
within the West, like we are so enveloped within the hegemon, the cultural hegemon of just capitalism itself, that even our left falls into bourgeois tendencies. Like unfortunately, a lot of the times, and one of them is like an inability to organize effectively, right? Like we're so afraid of becoming scary authoritarian USSR that we refuse to have any hierarchy or any kind of vanguardism. And it's
yeah,
it's it's we're working with like a false image of the USSR, like communism planted within our minds, and that effectively throws a ratchet into our own working class movements.
yeah,
Not to mention Coinal Pro and tons of just like dissident things that the state has done to just effectively destroy us and have us turn on each other and things like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very true. The anti-communist like element is so pervasive in leftist discourse and leftist thought, or like the mind of like the American left at least, that it's very uh, like stunting to the type of organizing that needs to happen. Like I'm an ML, um, but like the idea of even for a lot of people invoking Lenin, or invoking the idea of like some kind of like revolutionary party, some kind of vanguardism at all, feels like you know like this kind of like authoritarianism that they're scared
Okay,
of.
I'm
And
gonna
it's not like
call.
go read on authoritarianism by Engels, which they all should, but um yeah, it's fucked. Yeah. And I don't know what to do about it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the best we can do is just like create like a counter hegemon, cultural counter hegemon as best as we could. Your shirts kind of help with that a little bit. Just get people start to think about challenging their own beliefs, their inherent beliefs,
Yeah.
and just help people come to the immortal science of Marxist Leninism. I mean, that's.
Immortal science, baby. Yeah.
Speaking of that, top five shirts, top five favorite shirts you've ever designed.
Okay. This one is my favorite for sure, just because it's fucking sick. And I love just like having BB on me with a target. It makes me feel it makes me feel like I'm like I could shoot this man right now in a very I think my next one after that has got to be the Sailor Moon design. I actually did this with another comrade from Oregon. Uh, uh, Sees the Prince. Anyone listening, go check them out. But it's like a little Sailor Moon group, and they have the hammer and sickle, and it says "Don't panic, organize." This one I just like the story behind it. It's the Dragon Ball Z, so these are like the two anime ones. But Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball Z, he based like the main villain, Frieza, off of Japanese real estate speculators in the 80s that ruined the economy.
Yeah.
And when he was like, they were like, "Who'd you base it on? Who'd you base Frieza on?" And he's like, "The worst kind of people." I was like, "That's right." After that, the uh two that I probably like the most are this one's like "Labor is my savior." It's that old print with the rosary, but the rosary is the hammer and sickle. Um, I'm actually about to drop that one again. And then the next one is gotta be either the Comrade Jim with Ivan Drago from Rocky 4,
Hell yeah.
or yeah, or maybe the one I'm about to drop actually. I had some people that are like general contractors, and they were like, "I want something I can wear on the job site."
Right.
And so I created this line called the Department of Labor Collection, and it's all the idea that like Comrade Workwear is like the government, and we have like a Department of Labor, which is like doing all these things. And so this one, it's like Department of Labor has the actual OSHA violations number. Um, and then I had my buddy Thor, who is a really amazing illustrator, design uh, this like dude, sort of like whole like he's like running away with a cog. And he came up with this. It was like know the machine, break the machine, or something like that. And so that one we've been working on for like 6 months, and I'm fucking stoked about it. It's coming out like in a week.
All right, all right. And then let me see how long we've been going on. About
Okay, an
hour,
hour.
12 minutes. It's getting about time to wrap up. I think just final
Yeah.
question, like, why do you think political discourse recently has been like so suffocating? How do we make it like a little bit less suffocating, especially for leftists? Because I think like talking to liberals, it's been kind of hard. It's just things like
When
that.
you say suffocating, what do you mean?
Just like why has it been so hard to just be pro Palestine without uh the constant pro Kamala stuff? It's just political discourse has gotten into oh, you're against Kamala, well you must be for Trump. Damage control. How do we help people just break through these things, you think?
I think I think it's become suffocating because liberals are feeling really self-righteous.
Yeah.
Um, and they are the hardest people really to talk to about this stuff when they feel right. But I feel like one, sitting in your own self-righteousness, that like you've been seeing this genocide happening. So no matter what any of these people say, however much they browbeat you, like you're on the right side, and it's okay to have your red line be genocide. It's very
Absolutely.
much okay. um I think sort of maybe removing yourself a little bit from like the presidential discourse shit, because like no matter what, it's going to be Kamala or Trump, and no matter what, there's not going to be a fucking difference, and you don't need to ride for either of them. You don't need to talk about either of them. There's down ballot election stuff that's just as, if not more important. Think about those things, look into those things. And then I'd say the most important thing is, the whole notion of dual power in some kind of sense is actually getting engaged in your, community, learn your fucking neighbor's name, find an org that's doing maybe some mutual aid near you. Maybe it's like a food situation. Maybe it's like a housing, like a rent group or a tenant union or something. There's like groups that are also doing other stuff. You can join in. You should. Um, and I think outside of that, outside of like what we're talking about, is like forming some larger political party that can really take on the bourgeois two-party system. That's all we can do right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, America's nowhere near ready for like violent revolution or things like that. This is just how we're going to have to work with. Just create a counter hegemon as best we can, both culturally, organizationally, and perhaps even at best, like through a mutual org, like a little bit of structurally, so that we can
Yeah,
just sort of diagnose, have a little bit of cushioning for the oncoming fascism that's going to come from both parties, and also help move more people towards the immortal science. That's what I'll
exactly.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, and if there's any organizer kind of people in here, we need to get the organizers to organize with all their little fucking groups. There is a lot of us. That's what I've been doing this research for this Comrade Library thing.
Yeah,
There's a fuck ton of groups. Like there's so many people, but they're all just disparate. We just need to like coalesce. Like
absolutely,
it's we have it there. But yeah, I
absolutely.
really appreciate you having me on, man. It was great to talk to you. I've been following you for a good long while, and your takes are always on fucking point.
Absolutely. Same here. Same here. Where can people best find you? And you got any concluding marks?
Uh, find me at Comrade Workwear or ComradeWorkwear.com on any of the guys. Um, yeah, go check out my stuff. I got a couple new collections that are cool. And any of my Palestine stuff, especially this Netanyahu tee, profits are going to Palestinian Red Crescent Society. So you can feel good about your consumption.
All right. All right. This has been a good one.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. You have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Uh,
This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you.
What the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely made.
And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.